Hello, memoir readers. This is Shirley Showalter, and I'm here today with Elliott Glover. Is that a correct pronunciation?
Thank you for getting that correct. Yes, it is Elliott Glover, not Glover.
Yes, and I'm thinking Danny Glover, and I'm making a change because it's spelled the same, but it is pronounced Glover. So today I have a debut author with me. His name, again, is Elliott Glover. And Elliott, I think the best way to start is just to ask you to give us a little capsule of your life. Any memoirist is going to be going into detail, but let's start with the capsule.
Yeah, I guess just quickly, I'm one of three brothers. At a very young age, 3 years old. We ended up in the child welfare system, and from that point on, we were in and out of group homes and some sort of foster care throughout our lives. Eventually ending up in a small town in rural Pennsylvania, with nothing but cornfields and tobacco leaves.
I know rural Pennsylvania, yes.
And we're originally from Philadelphia, so we're used to the concrete jungle, and so that was a big shock when I turned 9. And then we remained in a group home until we aged out of the child welfare system, and then we were on our own. But thankfully, the three of us were able to stay together throughout our lives, which is difficult in the child welfare system, considering.
Yeah. So at what point in your life did you begin to want to write the story of the three of you and your adventures, if we might call them that, in the child welfare system?
My younger brother, Izell, we were just talking about this. It is a 25-year dream that has come to fruition, and I felt strongly then to try to shine a light on what that system was like for us, so that
and
I
you
can have
were
some,
about 25 at the time?
Oh, it's been about 30 years now.
Okay.
A little over 30 years since I've aged out. And yeah, I guess I was in my early 20s when I aspired to try to do something like
So
this.
soon after you aged out and were on your own, independent, you recognized that your story is one that was inside and you wanted to get it out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And do you call your story a novel or a memoir?
I call it a memoir. I never really thought of it as a novel, I guess, but it's no, it's definitely a memoir. It's true to the facts that are in there, and it is something that I could easily reflect back to draw this out.
I thought maybe the the listeners to this interview would like to begin with just hearing your voice on the page.
Okay.
And I have two selections here. The first, I think, is page 72.
Okay.
When you are, no, 71. It's the description of the diner where you are going to find your Auntie Angel.
Yeah, Aunt Angel. And where would you like me to begin on page 71?
I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's just the first paragraph on the page, and then finish that paragraph. So we have a couple of, it's the description basically of the diner itself that I want the readers and the listeners to hear.
Okay. Yeah. Jason, my cousin, Jason called again. His voice bellowed over the background music, much to the annoyance of some patrons and the fry cook, who I assume managed the diner. We followed behind Jason, each of us with bags and backpacks resembling a group of young wanderers. The air inside was thick with the scent of fried foods, coffee, and hot grease, a combination I relished. It reminded me of the Smyrna Diner back when I lived in Delaware. A row of eight booths with white tabletops and red vinyl cushion seats lined the windows facing 22nd Street. To the left, there was a counter with with an opening for the waitstaff to serve and bus tables. High-top stools and backless red vinyl cushions matched the booth seats. Those sitting in the counter faced the open kitchen, separate from the serving area. A rectangular opening behind the service area allowed the cook to pass out prepared foods. The floor was tiled with brown carpeted non-slip runners, and dim brownish yellow overhead lights cast a warm golden hue over everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How did you learn to write in such a sensory rich way?
I mean, I've always been very much about nostalgia, right? I mean, and everything. I mean, especially music, but everything. All my senses become like hyper aware, if you will. And you know, there are things that I'll remember about a room, walking in the door, you know, the people, the smell of things, the way it even feels, like the atmosphere. And I think it just that's the way that I saw it and see it, and it just comes out that way.
Mhm.
You know,
At the
that's
time you
just
wrote that description,
Mhm.
how long had it been since you had been in that diner?
uh 40 years, nearly, yeah,
Yeah,
just yeah, 40
yeah.
years. I have not been in that diner. That was the first time that I was in that diner, and I think 2 years later we had
Mm-hmm.
never been back in there. So it's been easily 40 years.
Yeah. Well, I spent a lot of my lifetime being an English teacher and reading a lot of student writing.
Mm,
And I recognize a gift when I see it on the page. And I
thank
certainly
you.
felt that way when I was reading your description of that diner. And it
Thank
said to
you.
me, especially as you describe yourself and your response to the arts, to
Mm,
music, and to experience of your own, so that's what you have inside you to write about. But I presume you also have read other people's books. Are you a reader as well as a writer?
I am. Uh, I'm an avid reader. I mean, I don't go without one. You know, more recently, it's been audiobooks and audibles because I don't have a lot of time, but to sit down with a book in my hand.
Mhm.
But I'm always reading or listening to some. In fact, now I do that more often than being in the car and listening to music because um, you know, I'm just I get taken away. You know,
Yeah,
I get taken away and I'm in that moment with the author or with the character. So yeah,
yeah.
I love it. Mhm.
Well, that was a hunch that I was sure was going to pan out because, again, that kind of writing comes both from the way you experience the world and also from immersion in
Mhm.
other writers doing other sensory rich descriptions and realizing that you don't get taken away unless
Right.
all of your senses are involved. And
Absolutely.
that's what you did. I could smell that diner. I could see that diner. I was in that diner with you.
Thank you.
And so that's why I wanted you to read that particular piece.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe we could go right on, since you have the book in your hands, to
Yeah.
pages 82 and 83.
Okay. 82
And I
and
think
83.
over time is the beginning of the paragraph
Okay.
to the asterisk.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to
Yeah,
set it up, go ahead and give us some
I
background.
got you. So, yeah, coming from Philadelphia, and where the parts of the city that we lived in, there was a vernacular, there was a patois, a Philadelphia jargon and slang that we were very immersed in. And we moved out of Philadelphia to this rural area, predominantly white, that spoke English properly. And so we wrestled with our language, right? I mean, the jargon that we use was you had to be from you know to be able to understand half of what we were saying, and it was almost like speaking another language. And so when
Mhm.
we moved to Avondale, Pennsylvania, um, we had to learn to speak properly, and become chameleons with our language. And eventually, as we got more comfortable, and we there was now this blend. If you ever heard of people who speak Spanish and English, they speak Spanglish.
Yeah.
Well, we spoke an Ebonics mixed in with whatever. But as we got confident and more into um, in the area, and becoming part of that area, um, there were times where it was okay to blend. And
Mhm.
so this part of the book speaks about that. It goes, over time, we recognize the power of language and how it shaped perception and influenced how others saw us. Our abilities to switch between languages connected us to different communities and worlds. Our journey in bilingualism wasn't just about learning two languages, it was about finding our voice amid a chorus of expectations on every side. We evolved, shedding layers of dialect and slang until our speech reflected a blend of our roots and aspirations. Ultimately, our language symbolized resilience, highlighting our adaptability, survival skills, and unique ability to thrive in different environments. It emphasized that being different was not a weakness, but a remarkable strength, proving that we were defined by who we chose to be rather than where we came from or where we now lived.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, yeah, a great description of the necessity of code switching, and
Yes.
also it sounds to me like by the end of that description, I'm sure there were downsides in both worlds
Yes. There
to this
was.
blend of language that you spoke.
Yeah, it was. Over time, I mean, you're when you go back home to Philadelphia, and now your speech is more proper. Your Philadelphia counterparts and family are looking at you, and they're like, you don't have to talk white anymore.
Mhm.
You're home.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then you go back home after being, back into your home, and you're coming home with you and y'all and Yamin and Johns and everything like that, and people are looking at you, and so you got to be aware of, and it influenced the way people looked at you,
Mhm.
and how they responded to you and everything like that. And you wouldn't believe how many times people would say you were so articulate, and
Right.
think that that was a compliment, as opposed to I'm just, I know who I'm talking to, so I have to use
Yeah.
uh this
Yeah.
English to be able to get through. So
Well, I love that sentence where you kind of ruminate on the impact of this language facility that you needed to acquire,
yeah,
and that it helped you know that being different wasn't the worst thing in the world.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it made you very unique, and
Yeah.
at times people would even envy that. They'd
Mm-hmm.
look and be like, man, he could blend right into that and not even miss a beat. And then others,
Yeah.
go back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah. I have had a little taste of that growing up Mennonite and on
Uh-huh.
a farm. So I'm in your rural white world. I actually
Yeah.
helped to do tobacco, so
Right.
we grew it on our farm,
Okay.
and I wore a white covering on my head as a Mennonite girl.
Okay.
This is not the same at all as your experience, but it was enough of familiarity with difference that
Yeah.
since I was being told in church to be separate from the world, and I was going to school, and you want to be cool in school,
Right.
you want to be in the world, and so when I read your description, I felt, aha, we both came to a similar conclusion about
Yeah.
differences in cultures, that it's really painful, especially when you're a teenager,
Yeah.
when there's no time in life when you most want to fit in than then.
Right. Right.
But but if you have to be different because there's something you didn't choose about yourself, and in more than one situation you are different, there is certainly something that builds up as a strength too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I definitely feel that happening to you as you go through the whole book, not just this passage, but you're dealing all the time with familiarity and loss, over
Yeah.
and over again. And through
Yeah.
that, you you have painful things happen, and it always doesn't always turn out rosy, but there
Right.
is a kind of building up. It's like muscle, it's building up
Yeah.
strength as you go through
Absolutely.
life.
Yeah. The adversity, I mean, I see it all the time, but one of the quotes that we have is, the home built me for this,
Yeah.
is the quote. And we say that because there are things that will happen in life. Um, I lost a job, all right,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and
A lot of people
you know,
do.
as a lot of people do, right?
Yeah.
But the home built me in a way that I'm not losing it right now, because
Mm-hmm.
I already know I gotta survive through this. And so I get through things a little bit differently emotionally than probably somebody who has had something always, you
Yeah.
know, and then something devastating happens, and now they don't even know how to respond to it,
Mm-hmm.
and how to cope with it. So the coping mechanism for us is a little different and stronger. And that adversity, um, I always said, you need a little bit of that stuff, because life is going to happen.
Yeah.
And if you don't have some of that group home stuff, it's gonna feel a
Yeah.
lot worse for some than others. Yeah.
Well, some of the really despicable characters in your book are the Hills, who are the do you happen to know if they're still living?
I would imagine the Hills, I guess it's possible they would be in their 90s
Mm-hmm.
at this point. Um, but I would imagine that their children are still alive.
Yeah. Well,
They were tough.
they were really tough, and they unfortunately they were also the first that you encountered, right?
Yeah, so I mean, at the first group home we were in, it was more, this was more religious, and these were like nurses and nuns,
Okay.
that took care of us. So they came from and we were 2, 3, 4 years old, and
Mm-hmm.
we were kids. So what's going to happen with that? Um, they were sweethearts. But when we got through the main campus and some of that ordeal, and finally landed in Avondale with the Hills, um, that was a mess.
Yeah.
for lack of a better way of
Yeah.
saying it. Yeah.
And it's probably something that's fairly common in the fostering system, where people get into it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people who get into it for good reasons, and I'm sure they're good foster homes as well. And you had some
Absolutely.
very good experiences yourself.
Yeah.
But the Hills were an example of the kind of person who's going to try to make money off the backs of children who are, aren't being given enough resources to live high on the hog
Mhm.
in the first place.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And you're stealing from the children.
It, it never really made sense because they didn't even like us.
Yeah.
I mean, there was definitely um, a bias against people of color by the Hills that
Well, they
really made
were
no sense.
that one episode where you are ill and
Yeah,
you go with them and they are actually at a KKK rally.
yeah.
It,
That that nightmare was ridiculous. I got my tonsils. Here's the thing: tonsils taken out November 15th. It was a Friday, 1986. I believe that was the year. It was either 80, 85 or 86. And the images of that uh, experience, to think that I'm nearly 50 and in my lifetime have seen burning crosses.
yeah.
Um, People can't even begin to fathom that because they think that, and it's crazy because here we're in Pennsylvania and people don't realize that the Mason-Dixon line is so much further north than they thought it was. When they talk about the South is Rising Sun, Maryland.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a headquarters there still.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it was very, as a person who has recently returned to Pennsylvania after being gone for 55 years and
mhm.
being pretty ignorant, growing up, there were no students of color in my school.
Okay.
And I graduated in a class of 144 in
Okay.
1966.
Okay.
And so that was the kind of world I lived in. I was reading Martin Luther King. I was reading to learn about what was happening in my time. And I had a
Mhm.
really good teacher who was very aware and who talked about the civil rights movement, which was just beginning not just beginning, but it was in full flower at the time I was graduating from
Right.
high school. And I would have been shocked to know that it will be, that in my own state of Pennsylvania or very close by,
Yeah.
there in
Yeah.
Rising Sun, uh, an active KKK. It was
Yeah.
appalling to read uh, how close you came
Yeah.
to
Absolutely.
this
Absolutely.
kind of hatred.
Yeah. And even now, driving I live in Virginia, but driving up, you know, it's almost like I turn the radio down. I see the sign on 95 that says rise. I turn the radio down. Like I have, I, I call it black man's PTSD, but
Yeah,
I shut and, close the windows. It's hot. We got to get past this exit and then we can go back to being normal. Even today,
yeah.
if it's at night, we don't have any of the vanity mirror or lights on and any of that. I don't want them to know that we're black inside the car.
Mm-hmm.
So even still, um, I have an aversion to
Yeah.
that part of that city. Yeah.
Well, we have a little less than 10 minutes remaining of our
Uh-huh.
time, and I want to get to the book itself because
Okay.
I'm lucky I get to read this book before it's actually published, and you are about to launch the book. What is your plan for the launch?
Yeah, the Kindle is now available for pre-order. The other two, the paperback and everything else, you know, couple of press releases are going out. I am self-publishing, and so I have a couple of interviews that are lined up virtually, um, and so I'm going to do whatever level of marketing for this. There's a local Barnes and Noble that's waiting
Mm-hmm.
to kind of get me on their list of, you know, to be able
Yeah.
to talk
Give
about
a
the book.
reading. Yeah.
Yeah, give a reading. And then, you know, that's down in Virginia, but the big following that I have because we have that podcast
Yeah.
is up in Pennsylvania, in, you know, where the group home is. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're working on a couple of readings and maybe some signings up there as
Yeah.
well. So, and then being from Philadelphia, I'm really hoping to be able to reattract like the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Philadelphia media
Mm-hmm.
because we were in their, you know, we were their babies for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're sweethearts, um, because of, you know, our athleticism. Um, and so I'm really hoping to be able to get some stuff around the Philadelphia area as well.
Yeah.
So
Well, it sounds very exciting. And
yeah.
you have this podcast that tell me what it means to be globally rated.
You know, it was crazy to even see that. The podcast,
Also called
to
Boys on the Hill, right?
yep, those boys in the hill. And to be globally ranked, we're right now still in the top 5% of all podcasts in the world, and I think there's something over 4 million of them. Um, it is. We really weren't. We were like, okay, let's go do this. Someone came to us, um, and said, hey, I really think that you guys should do this. You tell a story as well. We did it, and then it just continued to just it was amazing. And now it's been on hiatus so I could finish the book. We're getting ready to relaunch it and,
Yeah, great.
you know, and get it
Well,
going again. So
I was really impressed. It seems to me that you have a huge fan club in your little adopted hometown. Is that right?
oh, absolutely. They, I mean, and they get I mean, the calls that I get, and you know, it's people who are just like, I'm so proud of you guys. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
proud of you guys. You know, and there is they love us.
Yeah.
Um, despite the beginnings of getting into that town, where we are now, we're you know, we walk down into the local supermarket and people are like stopping you, you know. It's great.
A
So
true celebrity. And I think when I read the book and then I listened to the podcast, I really became a true believer also. I think you have
thank
a
you.
story that needs to be told. You have told it well. You have done the
Thank you.
homework to create an audience that will be your first audience. You did a successful Kickstarter for the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I am sure that only good things will happen to this book. And if
Thank you.
I can be a little bit of the part of helping that to happen, I'll be delighted.
Well, I truly appreciate it. This is my first author's interview, so I can check that, and thank you for giving me the platform to just kind of talk and be part of something that I'm really excited about. I
Yeah.
can't wait to see what this thing does. So it's
Well,
really
I
nice.
can't wait either. And I'm going to tell my friends about you, and I hope they'll share our little talk. This is Black History Month, so it's very appropriate that your story about three Black boys who came into a white town under some pretty dire circumstances, but who have survived that, and not only survived it, have gone on to be great storytellers and fathers and community people who are making an impact in the world. And
Thank you.
it's so wonderful that we can tell a story like this, inspire others who might be feeling uh, many of the negative effects that young people feel today. It's
Yeah.
we have so many stressors and difficulties and challenges in the world. But reading a story like this makes us believe that it's not impossible, that we can overcome.
We can overcome.
We can
Yes,
overcome.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah. I think that might be a good way to end. Thank you so much, Elliott, and all
Thank
best with
you.
your book.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shirley.